ball to Hamilton. Hamilton is forward to a ball that comes back at him, and he gets his foot put out, and that, of course, is in front of it, and he pushes up the onside of pitch. The ball that comes across to make this up. What part of Trinidad and Tobago?
Good evening, viewers, and welcome to Elections Watch 2015. I'm Michael Young, thanking you very much for joining us. Of course, we're in the studios of the National Communications Network, and this evening we're going to be discussing the President's announcement of the elections date this year. With me to have that discussion is the Honorable Attorney General and Legal Affairs Minister Anil Nandlal and the Minister within the Ministry of Finance, Bishop Warren Ejim. Welcome, gentlemen, to Elections Watch. Obviously, lots of things have happened today. Guyanese are discussing the situation in the country, and they're obviously having discussions about who they will support this year when elections are held on, I understand, May the 11th, 2015. Let's talk a little bit about the President's decision and his announcement. First of all, your own position on the announcement made by President Donald Ramotar. Let's start with you, Ejim.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good evening, viewers. The much-awaited announcement of the President has been made, and May the 11th has been identified by His Excellency the President as the date that Guyana will go to general and regional elections on. The President, in so doing, has exercised a constitutional prerogative which he exclusively enjoys under Article 60 of the Constitution, and has declared that date. It is important that I mention also that Article 111 of the Constitution provides that whenever the Constitution resides a power to be exercised exclusively by the President, that power is to be exercised by the President in his own deliberate judgment. What that means is that the President is to labor under no fetter, under no pressure, and under no form of compulsion in the discharge of that particular function or the exercise of that power. I say that to say that there has been calls, I see recently protestations, calling for the President to make this announcement. And in so doing, those who were leading this charge were essentially acting in complete disregard for the constitutional freedom with which the President has been imbued in relation to the fixing a date for elections. I want to also say at this point in time, to restate that there was nothing unlawful, there is nothing unlawful, nothing undemocratic, nothing wrong with the prorogation of Parliament in the manner in which it was done. The President exercised a constitutional power. He acted in accordance with the spirit and letter of the Constitution, and those who are alleging that the government or the President acted unlawfully and undemocratically are simply wrong. An act cannot be undemocratic. It cannot be unlawful when it is provided for by the Constitution, which is the supreme law of this land. And it is not a new power that is in the Constitution.
Yes.
It's a power that has been there since independence. The other point that I want to make is it is a power that was bequeathed to us by Her Majesty's government upon the attainment of independence. And it's a power that is common in all former British territories. The other point I want to make is that in recent times, the country that has exercised this power the most is the Dominion of Canada.
That is the power to prorogue.
The power to prorogue Parliament.
Yes.
The head of state of Canada is Her Majesty the Queen of England. The power to prorogue always resides with the head of state because it's a historical prerogative power.
Yes.
The Queen in England, because she is the head of state of the Dominion of Canada, still retains that power. So it was the Queen of England that prorogued the Canadian Parliament, acting upon the advice of the Prime Minister, of course, but the actual exercise of that prorogation power was done by Her Majesty, the Queen herself, in proroguing the Parliament of Canada 2 times over the last 7 years. And we didn't hear any hue and cry about this, the exercise of this power, when it was done by Her Majesty herself. But when it is done in Guyana, I don't know if there are different treatment meted out for different people and different country, or there are different standards of democracy. But when the Queen exercised the power, there was not a murmur of criticism emanating from any quarter. But here you have Her Majesty's representative, very critical, when our country, a sovereign nation,
Yes.
exercises a constitutional power.
Thank you, Ejim. Minister Ejim.
Well, thank you very much, Michael.
You're
and
welcome.
Good evening to all of our viewers. President Ramotar has made his statement. And I think now both his admirers and critics can only come to one conclusion. President Ramotar can be trusted. And I repeat for emphasis, President Ramotar can be trusted. He's an honorable man, he keeps his word, and he delivers on his promises. Both his admirers and critics are forced to make that conclusion today. Let's go back to November 10th. The President addressed the nation, indicating his concerns about some specific actions that were being peddled to be taken by the combined opposition.
Yes.
He prorogued the Parliament because he said, number one, he wanted to preserve the life of the 10th Parliament. Number two, he wanted to encourage an atmosphere for dialogue and discussion and for consensus building. The President wrote the leader of the opposition. He didn't speak to him through the media or through press conferences or public statements. He wrote the leader of the opposition, inviting him to come and have those discussions. It was the leader of the opposition who refused dialogue. The President tonight reminded us that he did not close the door, will never close the door, and his door is always open.
Okay.
Once the opposition made it clear that they were not interested in dialogue, the President made it public. He will not prolong prorogation, neither he has no intention of taking prorogation for 6 months, bring Parliament back into session or whatever, and then prorogue for another 6 months. He said he will not be using that power that is available to him as an option, even though it is constitutional. He promised the nation that he will not be doing that.
Okay.
In December, he told the nation, I will make an announcement very early in the new year concerning general elections. Here we are, January 20th, sitting in the studios of NCN, where all Guyanese are now aware the President has fulfilled his word. He has acted honorably. He has upheld his word, which means when he gave his word to the nation, he intends to keep his word, and he has announced the date for national and regional elections. So all the Facebook fans and pages and the statements in the newspapers, they might want to say May 11th is elections day, but I'm adding to that line of every
Yes.
journalist and every reporter, Ramotar keeps his word. And that is the assurance that we want to give to the people of Guyana, that President Ramotar will keep his word, he will keep faith with the people of Guyana, and he is a leader. That no matter what is the pressure that surrounds him, he can be trusted and he keeps his word.
Okay, let's move past all of that. The announcement has been made today. Obviously, Guyanese are going to be discussing the way forward and what will be happening within the confines of both government with regards to spending, campaigning, and all of those different things at the political level until we reach May. But before we start to have that discussion about moving forward, let's talk about why we're at this point and time, why we're at this state in our history, where the parliament is obviously going to be dissolved. The opposition had a one-seat majority, and there was an unwillingness amongst the parties within parliament to work together to reach a solution. What would you say, AG, was the commencement or the breaking point of all of the problems faced?
Well, it has to be the abysmal failure of the opposition consistently
Yes.
from 2011 December
Yes.
to now, well, immediately prior to the prorogation of Parliament, to put the welfare of the country as the paramount principle guiding their actions and positions in the Parliament.
Why was there a difficulty with doing that?
One would have expected that an opposition that has an advantage in the National Assembly would have used that advantage to advance the welfare, if not of all Guyanese, but at a minimum, their supporters. One would have expected, for example, that they will attempt to extract and exact out of the government more. So rather than have a budget of, let us say, $200 billion, champion and canvass and struggle for a budget of more than $200 billion, so that there is more money to provide more goods and services for the people of Guyana, to do more in terms of job creation, poverty alleviation, improvement of the health care of our country, improvement of the educational standard for our young people. One would expect that that advantage enjoyed by the opposition, a unique advantage, unprecedented in our history, would be used to achieve those objectives. What did we see the opposition doing with that advantage? They have used that advantage to force the government to do less. And that is manifested by a reduction of the budget, a cutting of a budget rather than an agitation for an increase of the budget. The chopping down of national projects like the Amila Falls, the specialty hospital, the airport projects, the Amerindian Hinterland Development Fund, the student loan at the university, and I can go on. So what you see consistently as a golden thread running through the parliamentary activities and activism of the opposition is a consistent and concerted effort to get the government to do less for the people. I surmise that that policy is being pursued or was being pursued so that to get the government to look bad, that the government is not doing enough, and it matters not to those who are the architects of that policy that the people of Guyana are the ultimate sufferers from that type of policy. That is not their concern.
Okay.
And that, to me, is or was the consistent policy of the opposition that continued with greater intensity as time progressed, which culminated in them coming up with this brilliant idea of a no-confidence motion, I presume with the expectation that the government will stand passively and idly by and allow themselves to be defeated by this no-confidence motion. And the government decided no. So it is the opposition, in particular, a particular opposition member, Mr. Moses Nagamotu, who came up with this bright idea of removing the government by way of a no-confidence motion. Someone in the press took advantage of this, made it very prominent, published it very prominent. It excited people's ego because they see this grand vision of removing a government from power, and they can take the credit for that type of monumental accomplishment, and they committed themselves to a course of conduct, getting others to join with them.
Yes.
And it is that course of conduct that precipitated the prorogation of the parliament. And what is ironic is that these are the very people who are running around the country crying that this government is big and bad and it has prorogued parliament, when they are the architect or architects of that prorogation.
Okay. Bishop Bajel, quickly, you spoke about trust. If the president had not announced the election date in January, in February, in March, if he had not heeded his words and all of the things that he committed to, what would have been the state of affairs within Guyana throughout the period while Guyanese obviously would have been waiting for the election date?
Well, when the president prorogued the parliament, the constitution allows for parliament to remain prorogued for up to 6 months.
Yes.
We're only in the second month of prorogation. It was the president himself who said that since dialogue would have failed, early in the new year, he was not demanded by anyone to do it.
So you're saying he was not pressured?
He was never
By
pressured.
the statements of the British, the statements of the other persons within the international community who also expressed concern
The
over the
persons
state
who
of Ghana?
spoke were seeking to grab headlines,
Yes.
and they were seeking to satisfy their appetite for attention. The president said, since before Christmas, early in the new year, I will name a date for elections.
Had he not named a date, had he not kept his word?
But if he had not kept his word, then he would have been putting himself in a position of ridicule.
Yes.
But an honorable man declares an intention and fulfills that expectation based upon what he would have said, and that's what he would have done. Now, there was no pressure. Early in the new year could have even gone to February.
Yes.
But I think the president, as a caring, sensitive, responsible leader, who is very mature in politics, I think he understands Guyanese, and he, as a leader, has clearly set the course for the Guyanese nation to move from now onward. We now know the date.
Yes.
We can all arrange our lives. We can now arrange our business. We can now get down with some level of certainty when elections will be. People can go ahead with their lives. Elections was never meant to be chaos, confusion, and turmoil.
Do you anticipate that that could have been the state of affairs if the president did not keep his
Well,
word?
some
That is the question.
people were agitating, like I saw in today's paper, a very known personality was calling for mass protests,
Yes.
pressure the president to name a date. But I stand with the position that the Constitution states, which was clearly articulated by the Honorable Attorney General, the president in his own deliberate judgment. And while people are asking the president to obey the Constitution, they are the ones who are seeking to push him not to obey the Constitution. Because when he's going to make a decision, it must not be because of pressure. It must be because he has deliberated, he has seen what is best for Guyana, and the rest of it. But Michael, let me make a very important point here tonight. Elections were not due in Guyana until 2016. And I'm sure by me saying that is no news to any Guyanese. They all know it.
Yes.
But the PPPC's position of the president naming election in May 2015 is not because of a power grab. We stood our ground. We faced the eventualities of a one-seat majority in the parliament. We didn't, after the first budget was cut, decide we're rushing to an election because we want to have a power grab. The president employed every political skill that was available to him in his mature life of politics, to engage, to build consensus around very important subjects. We need to remind the nation about the talks that were ongoing as it relates to the 2012 budget that eventually broke down, that led to what took place in Linden, the betrayal of trust on the part of the opposition. We need to remind the nation that when we were faced with the challenges of being blacklisted as it relates to the non-passage of the Anti-Money Laundering, the Countering of Financing of Terrorism Amendment Bill, it was the President himself at the highest level again engaged Mr. Granger and his team to build consensus. We were on the brink of being blacklisted, and I'm happy that I'm sharing this program with my learned colleague, the Attorney General, who did Guyana great service by going out into the international community, representing us at those forums, defending our positions, the lobbies of our foreign minister and the work of the Honorable Gail Teixeira, who went to Geneva. We stave off blacklisting. We earned ourselves some time. The President was hopeful at all material times that the opposition will behave in a responsible manner. The fact that we are having an election on May 11th is a statement to all Guyanese. The AFC, APNU combined one-seat majority opposition acted irrationally, irresponsibly, and not in the nation's interests during their tenure in the 10th Parliament. If they had acted responsibly, we would have been going for an election probably in 2016. Because like they said, this new dispensation that was created by the results of the November 20th, 2011 elections was to bring about a change in the way we do business. But the only thing that they would have done was to obstruct, block, prevent, rob, deny, and hold Guyana at ransom at very, very important and crucial times in our history. You know, where we could have been had we had a different approach to politics by the combined opposition. And what the President would have done, essentially, is to say to the Guyanese people, I have done all that I can humanly do as your elected President, based upon the powers that are available to me, by engaging the opposition to see if we could keep this country moving and we could get it to go forward on the path of modernization and prosperity and development. I have failed by way of engaging the opposition. The only way that I could continue to lead this country and to cause Guyana to become what we are dreaming about, and that vision of the future to become a reality in the present, is if I have a new mandate from the people of Guyana.
Okay,
and that new mandate is not just merely the PPPC winning an election, but it's the mandate that gives us the majority in the Parliament. And I think that must be put very square on the table from the very first day that we now know an election date. Our mission is not just merely winning an election, but winning the majority so that we can go back to what will be now deemed the 11th Parliament with a clear mandate, being able to ensure we carry Guyana where Guyanese want it to be, that with progress, prosperity, and development for all of our people.
Okay, we'll take a quick advertisement, and when we come back, obviously, we're going to discuss the next 4 months and what will be happening within the camps of, obviously, the People's Progressive Party Civic, and what will be the status quo of the government over those months. Do stay with us.
In the next 4 months, you will have to make choices, not just between 3 individuals or political parties. These choices will determine the future of our country. I present to you a platform that will secure jobs through investments in ICT, higher levels of education, and the modernization of our infrastructure. Unlike the other parties and individuals, I commit to further investments to secure the sugar industry and an agricultural diversification plan that would move us into value-added production. I present to you a platform that would see us achieving universal secondary education and expanded health care. I commit to a future where resources will be used to improve the life of every citizen through increased spending in the social sector, creation of a knowledge-based economy, and a future where every Guyanese would own their own home. I commit to a future that will see growing prosperity, where all will have equal access and opportunity to all services provided by the government. Those who oppose this agenda had a chance for 28 years. We cannot go back. The next 5 years are critical for our country. We have advanced work in oil exploration and started the building of a modern economy with investments in tourism, mining, and agriculture. We have reduced our foreign debt by almost half, and our international reserve is at its highest in our history. We cannot risk these gains. The work must continue. Let us move forward together. I am Donald Ramotar, and I ask you and your families to support this future. Join us in moving forward together.
Welcome back, and thank you very much for staying with us. For those of you who are now joining us, we're having a discussion about elections 2015, and with me in studio is Mr. Anil Nandlal and Bishop One Ejim. The next 4 months, gentlemen, the President has said May 11. Already there are lots of talk on social media and via different forums about the government's posture throughout this whole period. Guide us, AG. What is expected of the President during this time? Will there be a cabinet? What will happen?
No, Michael, government continues in office. There's a principle called the continuity of the executive.
Yes.
Governments under our constitutional structure continue in office until the government is voted out of office.
Yes.
So the government will continue to perform all the normal services that the government of Guyana performs. At the constitutional level, in terms of finance, the Constitution, along with the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, the two pieces of law provides a mechanism by which monies are to be expended during this period until an appropriation act is passed by the National Assembly. And it is that 1/12 of the last budget will be available to spend
on a monthly basis.
On a monthly basis, 1/12 until the Appropriation Act is passed. And that has nothing to do with elections. It has nothing to do with prorogation of Parliament. That is what takes place at the beginning of every financial year.
Yes.
The fears and apprehensions that are being expressed, based upon what you said, are completely without foundation, they are baseless, and they are whimsical and capricious, because there is no evidence over the last 22 years that we have been in government that there is any misbehavior or non-compliance with the constitutional roadmap or legal roadmap in terms of how monies are to be expended. There is a case that is going on in the court which asks the court a similar question, and there is no evidence produced in the affidavits that would tend to suggest that, though that fear is expressed, that would tend to suggest that this government has ever been guilty of not complying with that constitutional mechanism which governs spending in any given financial year prior to the enactment of the Appropriation Act, which is the national budget.
But sir, with all due respect, obviously Mr. Greenidge, Carl Greenidge, who's the shadow finance minister or was within the National Assembly, and his colleagues, Mr. Grange and the others, do not share that same view that government will not utilize taxpayers' monies over this period of time to campaign within the PPP, that they will not embark upon all of these different campaigns aimed at promoting their own leaders and policies and their manifestos. Address that issue for me.
I will never be able to allay the concocted and fabricated fears and figments which exist in the minds of the opposition leaders. And if you're asking me to do that, you're asking me to do an impossibility. So they will continue to harbor these fears, and there's nothing I can do about it. If they have evidence that this is being done, then they should draw it to the nation's attention. As far as I am aware, a government does not campaign.
Yes.
The People's Progressive Party, political parties campaign. And the Progressive Party, not in terms of Guyanese politics, but in terms of hemispheric politics, is not a novice at elections. We are about the oldest political party with perhaps the best political machinery in the English-speaking Caribbean. So we don't need anyone to lecture to us how to run an elections and how to prepare for an elections. We have been doing it successfully. Since 1950, we have never lost an elections in this country. We lost power, but not an elections. We were robbed of the government of this country for 28 years. So, and by those very people who have these fabricated fears about governmental spending and campaigning. As I said, and those are the very persons who I read in the newspapers are unprepared to support legislation that will regulate campaign finance.
Is your party ready to support that, sir?
I can't speak for the party at this point in time, but I know that you engage regularly with the General Secretary, and I will ask you to pose that question to him.
That will not be.
But I am saying to you that there are a grouping of politicians out there who are expressing these baseless fears, and they are the ones, when posed with the question about supporting legislative mechanisms being put into place that will regulate campaign financing, they said no.
Okay.
So I am saying to you that their fears are without basis, and they may be guilty of financial maneuverings which cannot withstand scrutiny and proper analysis, and that is why they are expressed aversion to supporting legislation that will bring campaigning regulation to campaigning financing. Campaign finance.
Michael, I think one of the things we need to say, the PPPC government does not enjoy the luxury that the AFC and the APNU enjoy.
How so?
They can make spurious claims. They can make statements that they don't have to support by any fact. We have to be truthful, and we have to deliver on our word.
30 million across the floor.
And I am being reminded to give an example. You had the leader of an opposition party by name, Mr. Ramotar, who made a claim to the people of Guyana that the PPP was paying 30 million to buy 3 opposition parliamentarians from the APNU to vote with us so that the no confidence motion would not have been passed. Now, let me explain to you. Every government minister and every government ministry must continue to function and carry out their function. For example, all the roads that are being built have to continue. The schools that are being built, they have to continue. They have to be managed. The project execution units must be able to manage them. People must get paid their salaries. The hospitals must function. School must go on. The children must be able to write their exams. the country must remain normal. An election was never meant to collapse a country. An election is an event that allows the people of a country to give a review on the performance of their government and to determine if they would like to have a change. And that must be done in a particular environment. Development don't stop because of an election date is named. We have to continue to deliver goods and services. And like the Attorney General said, there must be a difference between a government function and political party campaigning. What happens when you have an election? In the incumbent, you will have personalities who form part of the government, who will be carrying out government functions, and at the same time they will have to be in the trenches, so to speak, campaigning. The opposition would often cry foul. For example, if a hospital that is scheduled to be open by the end of February is to be open, the Minister of Health, possibly the President, will show up as usual when there is an election or whether there is no election to do their ministerial and state function. You know, the opposition will say, you see, they're campaigning. The school's feeding program have to continue. Children have to have their uniforms. The textbooks must continue to be procured. We have to continue to buy the drugs. We have to continue to engage doctors and foreign consultants to come and look after the... So all of these things will continue.
Okay.
So in the next 4 months, we gotta promise the people of Guyana that the goods and services that they demand and deserve, your government will continue to deliver those goods and services to you. But we will also be wearing another hat at the appropriate time when we come to your communities to unashamedly, and I say that boldly, unashamedly request your vote and to show you why you should support the PPPC at an election, because we're the ones who would have brought development, dignity, and prosperity to the people of Guyana.
Now, address this issue for me quickly, Ejim. The president earlier today appealed to Guyanese. He wanted the atmosphere in the country to remain calm, and he wanted stability. He wanted throughout, during, and after the elections for there to be some sort of, I don't know if you want to say, high level of patrioticness. But he was appealing to them to keep sober heads. Why is this, given the history of our country and what usually happens in the pre-1990, 2001 year, if you want to say that, or 2006 elections, you know, with respect to our politics?
Unfortunately, Michael, our recent history is littered with chaos, confusion, violence. Well, from 1992, 97, 2001,
yes,
we have had 2 fairly peaceful elections thereafter.
Yes.
So when I speak about our recent history, I was going back to 2001, 97, 92.
Yes.
And they're not too far removed,
yes,
from today's current times. And those elections have associated with them violence, chaos, burning, arson, robberies, etc., driven by a political machinations and drawing its inspiration from political views expressed. I don't think anyone can rationally discount politics in the violence which preceded and perhaps ensued those elections. So I believe that that is what the president had in mind. But more importantly, I have observed, and personally, in recent times, there has been a high degree of intolerance by the opposition leaders in their public statements and sentiments. There has developed in recent times, over the last few months,
yes,
a belief, a feeling, an atmosphere, an attitude, a proclivity that seem to suggest that only one set of people can express their views, and that the government are not among those chosen few who can speak on matters of national and international importance. So you have, for example, an ambassador who lambastes the government, and when the government responds, the opposition and their architecture jump upon the government, and the government becomes the big and bad person. Any given matter, look at over the past 3 or 4 months, almost every statement coming out of the PPP or at the level of the government on any given matter, and you will see the condemnation, the almost hate with which it is met by leading players in the opposition. And this is not confined to government, but the judiciary and even the Speaker of the National Assembly, whenever he takes a position that is supportive of the government, or any civil society organizations or the business community, for example, whenever they take positions that are supportive of the government, be it on the anti-money laundering issue, be it on any given matter, you find the response that it excites from the political directorate in the opposition is one of intolerance. There's a lot of bitterness, a lot of vengeance. Look, just the other day, Mr. Basil Williams, my colleague, issued a blistering condemnation against the private sector about prorogation. The CARICOM Council of Ministers issued a statement supportive of the government on the question of prorogation, saying that it is constitutional, it's the exercise of a constitutional power, and it is a facility in the democratic architecture of Guyana, having regard to all constitutional provisions and having regard to the constitutional provisions of all CARICOM states. Look at the response from the AFC, for example, today. A cuss out of CARICOM, a picketing at the CARICOM headquarters with some very, very disrespectful and degenerating statements being made. So nobody seemed to be able to have freedom of speech and to speak their own minds in Guyana other than the opposition parties and their followers. That is something that must stop. And I think that that is what the president was speaking about. There is a growing, I don't know, they are, my feeling again, and I don't attribute this at all to the government, I have my very myopic and immature way of concluding, but I believe that the thirst for power, the hunger for power, the little taste of power that they enjoyed in the National Assembly has an intoxicating effect. And that is why you see these very unconventional responses and positions being taken, where an important regional institution like the CARICOM, all the CARICOM did, CARICOM Council of Ministers did, was to point to the Constitution of Guyana and point to the fact that the president has exercised a constitutional power in accordance with the Constitution of Guyana, and lo and behold, war was declared on CARICOM. That is the type of intolerance that I think the president had in mind when he issued that very mature and sober caution. And it is my sincere expectation that those who aspire for leadership and those who expect young people to emulate them and who are looking to inspire young people, because young people is a premium now, this election, I hope that they will consider that and punctuate their outbursts and their visceral actions with a little more maturity.
Okay, Bishop, let's wrap up because we have a few minutes left. Both your final take on the matter, the way forward, obviously, for Guyana, because I do hope we'll have another opportunity to continue our discourse.
One man said, the disease cannot be in the fruit if it is not in the root. The manifestations and the conduct of the opposition at the level of the National Assembly, which their modus operandi was might is right. It's not winning the admiration of people. It's not articulating positions. It's might is right. We had the politics of bullyism, the 33 men and women on the other side of the aisle in the National Assembly practiced the politics of bullyism while we were there in the 10th Parliament. I think it is reasonable for Guyanese to have some fears that if at the level of the National Assembly they practice the politics of bullyism, what they might want to do during the run-up to an election. But I believe Guyanese would have matured. We have rejected that politics is about war. The PPP sees the opposition not as enemies. They are our political opponents. They're not enemies. They are political opponents. They share different political opinions. But we are Guyanese that must work together for the building of Guyana. And I believe if there's anything that we can do over these next 4 months is to display to the Guyanese electorate, all of us from every side, that we are mature by conducting a campaign that is based upon issues where we win the admiration of people and cause them to vote for us based upon the views expressed and not the might is right demonstration.
Thank you very much. AG, quickly as we wrap up.
I want to share the sentiments expressed by Bishop and to reiterate what I have said. This is an election in any country's political calendar is a very, very important milestone. It is a very significant factor in the democratic infrastructure and equation of any country. It is not intended to cause disruption. It is not intended to excite fracture in a society, but it is intended to heal. It is intended to advance democracy. It is intended to have the people of that country in a real way have a say in the political direction and the constitution of the political directorate that will manage the affairs of the country for the next 5 years. From that perspective, therefore, elections is a very, very significant and it's a very momentous occasion for any country. We are fortunate that we live in a democracy, first of all, that holds elections, because there are many countries in the world where there are no elections. And secondly, we have a government that guarantees free and fair elections, that has a history of administering and inviting to oversee those elections, administering fair elections and elections that are free from fear, and inviting all the international observers to come here and observe those elections. Why that is important for me to reiterate and remind our people, because we have a peculiar and particular history where some of the very people who are vying for the next government are the very people who denied the people of this country free and fair elections, instilled fear in them, killed people at elections time in their efforts to steal the people's votes. And we must not, out of, I suppose, shame or out of an effort to sweep things under the carpet, forget these historical experiences and antecedents, because these are the historical antecedents that must ensure that our future do not have these horrific episodes repeating themselves.
Yes.
And young people must understand that. And therefore these elections must be held in the best atmosphere and in a transparent way, and that is fair, and so that everyone will accept the elections results. Because we also have a history. Though the elections are fair, they are free from fear, they are observed and certified to be free and fair by all international, credible and acclaimed observers. We have had 3 elections that violence resulted because those who lost the elections refused to accept the elections results. That is what, those are the historical experiences that would have inspired the president to make those remarks and to issue that appeal for calm. These are not things that we are unaware of, that or that are not part of our historical experience. We have confronted all of this, and these are things that we must ensure that do not recur. And how do you ensure that they do not recur? You do not entrust governmental power to people who have these qualifications as part of their repertoire.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me on Elections Watch 2015. I'm Michael Young, viewers, thanking you as well for staying with us. Do have a very good rest of the evening. Goodbye.